chocolate is melting in a so-called chocolate city. Some say from now on, Washington, D.C. should be called a vanilla swirl city. But experts say with rising populations of white and Hispanics across the country, nicknames may no longer carry the meaning.
In today's video, I want to talk about why I moved from Washington, D.C. to Charles County. So if you're thinking about leaving D.C. or moving to Charles County, watch the end of the video. There's so much to like about DC. You got the culture, you got the food, you have the monuments, you have the different historical places, you have the different sports teams that's there. Why would somebody want to leave DC, right? The best way I could describe DC is like that ex that you and her both have great chemistry. It's always a great time when y'all hang out, but you know that y'all shouldn't be hanging out. You go against your best judgment. You know, this is like the umpteenth time that y'all have linked up. You know, it's a vibe again, right? You have a great evening. Y'all go back to the crib, and then you wake up the next morning, you roll over to go, you know, say good morning, whatever the case may be, and she's gone. But you also notice that your keys are gone, your PS5's gone, your TV's gone, some of your shoes are gone. And it's like, yo, how do I fall into the same trap every time? That's how it is growing up in DC. It's kind of like a love-hate relationship. You know, crime is a big issue in DC. But the interesting thing about crime in DC and growing up or being a local of DC is kind of like you're used to the crime. And you kind of also, you know, learn to live around those things. Like, I don't ever have to worry about getting my car broken into if I don't own a car, right? And that's something you can get away with in DC because we have public transportation. But then there's things that's not as easy to avoid all the time, like getting robbed or maybe being a casualty in some type of shooting. Those things never happen to me personally, but when you live in DC, it's always like this lingering aura of like, at any given moment, it could be you. And who actually wants to live like that, you know? But the thing is, you kind of, again, you get into a routine, you get used to these things, and you just live your life. It just becomes a regular everyday thing. But I believe in the last few years, and I guess there's even some statistics that back this, it's actually gotten worse. And it's almost like I would compare it to like some type of kickback or some type of event where, you know, different people there, different walks of life, you know, it's a vibe, everybody's chilling. And, you know, even though it's some riffraff over there and over there, you're not really tripping about it. But then when it actually gets louder, when people actually start to yell and people actually moving funny, then you kind of like, you know what, that might be my cue. That's what it was like my last few years in DC. It just seemed like, okay, I've kind of overstayed my welcome. Like, instead of me, you know, continuing to play this game of Russian roulette, you know, where any given moment I could be a casualty or someone I know could be a casualty, it might be time for me to look somewhere else to live. Now, what's interesting about crime, again, like I said, it's not really a big deal for people who live there because they're kind of used to it. But the thing is, when you pair crime then with affordability, that's when you really start to see people's world shake. There was a time where in DC, like, you could get away with living in DC as a single person with maybe one job, maybe a little side gig, but really one job could really get you through. We're at a point now where the average person likely need to be living with a roommate, a spouse, a partner, have multiple incomes, maybe a few sides, whatever the case may be. But even when you consider doing all of those things in order for you to be able to live in the city, you still have to deal with the crime and the inconveniences that come with living in the city. When you think about those two things, it's almost like you're coping, right? Where it's like you know the crime is what it is, and you know it costs this much to live there, and it's like, okay, what are my options? And I think a few things play into the reason why people don't leave. And I think one of those things is, you know, that's their comfort zone, it's familiar, it's what they know. And the other thing deals with maybe they don't have the means right now to actually leave. I remember growing up in DC, and, you know, you would see family and friends every now and again leave and move to different areas, or, you know, you just would never see them, they just up and leave. And I would find out years later on where they moved to and why. And I'm like, why would you leave DC? Like, I mean, when I look around, I think DC has everything. It has the public transportation where you don't necessarily need a car. You know, everything that is, you know, DMV is DC. Everybody's coming here to hang out. Everybody's coming here to do things, dine, and, you know, this is the spot, right? So in comparison to places that I heard people are moving to, I'm thinking about these places. I'm like, those places are super boring. Like, there's nothing out there. Whereas in DC, it's like it's always jumping. But as I got older, I started to see it like maybe that's the problem. Maybe the issue is that DC's always jumping. And that leads to my next point about crowds. So as they continue to make improvements on the DC area, you know, you tore down Berry Farms, they done made improvements on the Navy Yard area near the National Stadium. They made improvements in the waterfront area near the wharf. As they continue to make these improvements, you see more people not only moving down into the area, but you also see more people visiting the area. Now, this is fine if you don't live in the DMV area, especially don't live in DC, because, you know, you'll visit every once in a while, go home, and won't see DC again for like another year. But when you live in the DC area, Now you're dealing with these additional people when you're taking a train, when you're taking the buses, when you're just walking down the street, when you're, trying to catch an Uber, different events going on downtown. It's just always something going on. But the worst thing out of all the things dealing with crowds is the traffic. Rush hour lasts a lot longer than it used to. And it just seems like during rush hour, there's only one way in and out of the city. Even if you don't have a car, you're going to pay it either way, whether it's on the public transportation or on the road. So after 20 plus years of fighting for my life, both figuratively and literally, I met a young lady, and her family actually lived out Charles County. And that was the first time I actually got an experience, like not just visiting Charles County, but actually like existing, like living in Charles County, living anywhere other than the DC area. And it really got me considering what life would be like outside of DC. Everything was in DC for me. My immediate family, where I worked, everything was too convenient. But on the flip side, everything also seemed too inconvenient as well. And I think that the people who live in DC who might be considering leaving DC, that's something that they have to battle with all the time. It's like, are the pros outweighing the cons? And if not, like, why am I here and where would I go? I know you're probably wondering, like, why Charles County? You don't necessarily have to be Charles County. I mean, you can go anywhere you want. I know I have friends and relatives that have moved to Richmond, the Carolinas, the outskirts of Virginia, like Woodbridge area, Fairfax. So, a lot further from the DMV area, but kind of still within those states. But I know for me, Charles County was just far enough, but just close enough to the city. There was a time where I was still working out there, so it was still convenient. It wasn't too far. I would just jump on 210 and still get to work. But I promise you, wherever you move, once you fully settle in, you're not even gonna think twice about DC. Now, on the positive side, I would say the things I miss most about DC is not needing a car, obviously. Going to the carryout, like everywhere has a carryout for the most part, especially you're in the inner cities of different states. But it's just not the same. Like, it's really not the same. There's nothing like going to a carryout in DC and getting 3 wings and French fries, mumbo sauce and everything, salt and pepper, right? But even with that, it's like the things I listed, okay, the other thing would be maybe things to do, right? You live in the DC area, you jump on a quick bus or train, and you're down by Gallery Place, or you're down by Georgetown at Adams Morgan. But even with those things, it's like, is it worth it? And I think for a lot of people, it's not. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more and more people, when they finally do have the means, and they gain the courage to leave, I wouldn't be surprised to see more people leave. And honestly, if you or someone is considering leaving DC, my best advice is, don't be afraid. Like, honestly, DC is so colorful and diverse. You kind of got a little America in that area, in kind of like city form. And you think that, you've kind of seen it all, but in reality, I promise you, the East Coast is so much bigger than just DC, right? America itself is so much bigger. The world is so much bigger than just DC. And I would challenge you to give yourself a chance to see, what life is like outside of DC. Now, obviously, it's going to take a little work. It's going to take some sacrifice. I mean, if anything, just take some time, lay low, stack your money, work hard, and literally just begin to consider, where you like to live outside of the DC area. Maybe reach out to some family, friends who have moved and kind of get their perspective on where they are. But I know for me, that place has become Charles County. All right, so I know that got super deep, but honestly, I have a heart for people, and I want to see people win. I want to see people succeed. I want to see people, make improvements on themselves. I want to see people get to higher heights. And if you are or know someone who's considering leaving the DC area and maybe want to move somewhere else out in the DMV, make sure you hit me up. Whether that be in the comment section, email, on social media. You can follow me on Instagram, because I would love to help. If this video was helpful at all, make sure you leave a comment below. And also, if you've moved from the DC area recently or considering moving, let me know in the comments below. It all starts with a conversation.